Hello, my name is Sharif, and this is the fifth tutorial video in our series of tutorial videos where we describe how you create mobile workspaces for the Dynamics 365 for Operations mobile app. Where we last left off, we had just finished creating an action that allowed our mobile users to create sales orders, and we had just finished configuring this action to allow selecting the customer account for a lookup. So let's review what that looks like. So from the mobile app, you open the Actions menu, and you would tap on Create a New Sales Order. Here you see the customer account field, and tapping on it opens the customer account lookup where you can select a customer account and go ahead and process that sales order. There we go. So now in this tutorial video, we're going to take those concepts a step further. We're going to show you how you can create an action that allows adding lines to a sales order through the details page. And we're going to introduce a couple more concepts here related to the complexity of this situation. We're going to show you how you can use business logic to work around some of the miscues and the bindings behind your forms. And we're also going to show you how you can use business logic to hide the lookup pages that appear on your landing page. In this case, we have an all customer page, and we want to sort of hide that. We only want it to appear when someone is trying to access it as a lookup page. We don't want it to appear from the landing page of our mobile workspace. All right, so we're going to start off by editing our sales order management mobile workspace. We're going to go ahead and add that action for adding a line. So we're going to select sales order details. Going to select that page, click on edit, go to actions, and add our action for adding a line. All right, now as a part of designing this action, we need to remember the concepts we learned in the previous videos, which is we need to make sure we start off with a form that is at the root level, a top level form, a form that's accessible by searching or via the menu. And we also know that once we open such a form, the framework is going to enable the Select Fields button for us because the framework recognizes that I'm designing an action that's going to be available on the sales order details page. And it knows that the backing entity, the backing table for sales order details is sales table. And now that the form that I've opened, its master root data source is sales table, the framework will allow me to select fields and go on about the process of designing my action. As we mentioned in the last video, when you design an action, you want to make sure that you open a top level form. You don't interact with the form until you click the Select Fields button. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And now I'm going to execute the steps that the framework is actually going to execute for a mobile user when they add a line. All right, so the first step as a part of adding a line is to get to the details for that sales order. So I'm going to go ahead and select one of these sales orders and navigate to its details. All right. So since I'm navigating to the details for the sales order, the framework is going to capture that navigation and knows how to get to the details form of the sales order now. The next step is to click the Add Line button. This tells the mobile system how you add a line. You have to open the sales order details form as we just did, and you have to click the Add Line button. Now I'm going to select the data fields that I want to make available to the mobile user. Right now there are no input fields they can set values into, but if I go ahead and set data into them, such as the item number here, the quantity further on, the site, and the warehouse. And one last one, I want to make the unit price available as well. Now, I don't want to click done quite yet, right? Because I haven't finished designing this action. There's one key step that needs to happen as a part of adding a line, and it's clicking the save button. But let's pretend that I forget to click the save button. What will happen? So I click done here, and I get a pop-up from the mobile framework asking me, have I performed all necessary data operations for this task? In this case, I haven't, right? Normally what would happen is I would click the save button here, and the framework would give me the dialog letting me know that it detected that save operation or detected a general CRUD operation, and that means your action has been successfully created and will work in our offline scenarios. So let me go ahead and say no, I actually haven't. I need to click the save button. There we go. We have automatically ended the field selection process for you. This helps creating pages or actions that have unintended side effects on data and make sure that they work in our offline scenarios. What this really means is that under the hood, the framework understands that as a part of this action, a sales line is created in the database. Right? It detects that CRUD operation so that it knows that a sales line being created is something that should happen when this action is completed. And the way it leverages that information is now when the mobile app is offline, when the mobile user's device is disconnected, you can go through this action, you can create that line, you can add that line to the sales order, And we'll be able to show you a temporary line created in the mobile app. While the app is disconnected, we'll create a temporary line on that sales line, a temporary line on that sales order. And that temporary data will appear wherever else it needs to appear, wherever else it's referenced inside of the mobile app. Because again, the mobile app has that offline data schema and it understands those relations. All right, so let's go ahead and back up here. We're done creating our action for adding a line. Let's go ahead and click done, save. Gonna have to override our changes there. Now we've updated the metadata on our mobile workspace, so we pull to refresh from the landing page. Now if we go into a sales order and we go to the sales order details, we see the action for adding a line is now available down there. But we're not quite done here. Let's go ahead and open that action and see what we have. So we have the fields we expect, but if I tap on any of the lookups, no lookups open. And this is because we didn't design these as lookups yet. We need to create backing pages for the lookups, for item number, for site, and for the warehouse. So let's go ahead and do that as well. I'll enter my mobile workspace again. I'm going to start off by creating a backing page for all of my items, which in this case are going to be products. So I'll call them all products. There we go. So let me go to the top level form that has all of my products. The form is open, so I click Select Fields. I want to make sure I capture the data value that needs to be set into the item number field when I'm adding that line. And in this case, the item number field will accept a product number. So I'll go ahead and add the product number there, and I'll add the product name so the user understands what product they're selecting. And I'm done designing this page. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for the sites and the warehouses. So I go to the top level page for sites. I select Add Fields. Need to make sure that I select the site number because the site number is what I enter when I'm creating that sales line. And I can select this field to make it easy for the user to understand which site they're referring to. And again for the warehouses. All right, the warehouse number being the most important part of that. All right, now that I have my pages for products, sites, and warehouses, I should be able to configure my lookups on the add line action. So let's hop back into that add line action. Let's select the site and warehouse first. We'll come back to the item number. There we go. So we see all sites appears in this list, and this is because the framework understands that the site field that appeared on the sales order details form that appears in that lines grid, it understands that field is bound to the same table that my list on the sites form is bound to. So it makes that available for selection. Same thing for the warehouse. The form I have open right here, this list is bound to the list of warehouses, right? It's bound to that table. And when I was on the sales order details page, that particular field that accepted the warehouse number was bound through an EDT or some other relation, but eventually bound to the same backing table. Framework understands that and allows me to select the all warehouses page. All right, so it's very, very aware of those bindings, very, very aware of that data schema. All right, and because it's so aware of that data schema, we're going to run into an issue with our item number here. When I open the properties, I don't see all products as a page here. I can't select all products, and that's because the item ID field that appears on the sales order details when you're adding a line, that's bound to something different than my all products form is bound to. Let's go ahead and look at the forms. Let's look at the way they're designed, look at their data model to see what's going on here. So on the sales table form, when I'm adding a line, which happens inside of the lines grid, I type in the item ID into this field right here, sales line underscore item ID. This field is bound to sales line. The data source, the backing table for this guy is sales line. Right? But when I go to my products form, right, this grid and its items, they're all bound to equal res product. So these entities don't match, these backing tables don't match. So the designer, to prevent me from trying to design a broken scenario, preemptively prevents me from selecting a page that won't work for that lookup. But in this case, I know I can work around that for this scenario. For this scenario, I know that the sales table in this item ID field it doesn't really care where the data comes from, right? You can enter a number into that field. As long as that number corresponds to a product, then the process will work, right? And that's what's important to us. And that's why we selected the product number as a part of designing that lookup. This makes sure that we can grab the product number from this field when it's displayed as a lookup page, and then paste that product number into this field when that action is being played back on the server, right? Now, in order to configure this, because the designer wants to prevent me from making what is a rookie mistake, I can sort of go into business logic and override that behavior. I can configure this directly inside of my business logic for the mobile app as a more advanced user with a better understanding of how my data model works. So this is the first time we're going to be using business logic in these tutorial videos. So I'll go ahead and create a business logic file, and I like to use Visual Studio Code to do this. So I'll go ahead and create a new file. Need to save my file. I'll call it sales order management. Need to make sure I put the .js there, because all of our business logic files are JavaScript files. There we go. Now on my clipboard, I have a template for my business logic file. Go ahead and paste that template here, and I'll explain what we have inside of the template. All right, so this function in my JavaScript file, this is going to be executed and run when the mobile workspace metadata is loaded. All right. And as a part of running that, it's going to define these functions. It's going to define my workspace initialization function, my page initialization function, and my action initialization function. They will be defined, right? And then as a part of executing this, when my workspace metadata is downloaded, it's going to return those functions to the framework, and the framework expects the names app init, page init, and task init. All right, so the framework is going to associate these three functions with my sales order management workspace. All right, and these functions are executed at different parts of the mobile app lifecycle. The workspace initialization, aka the app init, is going to be executed whenever a user opens the workspace. All right, so let me show you what that looks like. So from here, I'm on the mobile dashboard, and I see my list of mobile workspaces. When I tap on a mobile workspace, the initialization for it is run, and then it renders for me as a user. So that means right before it shows me the list of pages here, all sales orders and all customers, it will have executed my function for workspace initialization. It's very similar for a page. Whenever you open a page, and it doesn't matter what page, it could be all sales orders or all customers, but the moment you open it, your page initialization function is going to be run. And in here you can have an if statement or a switch statement that you decide to, you change the behavior based on the page that's being loaded. You'll have access to the page metadata, so you can check the page name and design different behavior for different pages. Something very similar whenever an action is loaded. So in this case, for my all sales order page, I open the create a new sales order action. The action initialization will be called, this function will be executed, and then the user will see the action displayed to them. All right. So we'll get into the details of how we can use page initialization and action initialization in some other processes and some other scenarios later on. Today we're going to be sticking to the workspace initialization, and that's because we're going to be configuring things that are static, things that only need to be configured one time, not every time the page loads, not every time the action loads. We're going to be changing some of the metadata on an action, but we're only going to change it one time because it only needs to be configured one time. We're going to be configuring that lookup on the action, and we do it one time so that every time the action is loaded in the future, that metadata has been changed and it sticks. So we have an API for that, and the API hangs off of the metadata service, which is provided to your business logic for ease of use. That function is called configure lookup. All right, and configure lookup takes a few arguments. The first one is going to be on what action is the lookup that you want to configure. And in this case, our action is called add line. So let's go ahead and copy that name. We need to reference it by the action name and paste that in there. The second one is what field should have the lookup behavior. And in that case, it's going to be our item number field. So let's open its properties, make sure we get its name, paste that in there. The next thing is we need to pass in the properties for our lookup. So the properties it expects are lookup page. Right? So this is the page name that's going to be our lookup, and in this case it's going to be the page we created for all the products. So let's go ahead and edit that guy, get his name. There we go. Going to do the same thing for the value field. As we mentioned before, there are two fields you should configure when you're designing an action or designing a lookup on an action. You need to get the field that is going to be the value that's placed into the sales line right after the user selects an item from the lookup. So we're going to grab the value out of the display product number and place it into this control and then process the action on the server. We also have the display field we can set up. Right? In this case, the display field is going to be the same. We want to display the product number after the user selects the value. And we have one final property here. I'm going to go ahead and set him to true. All right. So that's all we have to do to configure a lookup. Let's go ahead and get our mobile device broadcasting again. So one moment. All right. So now we've configured our JavaScript file for our business logic. We've configured the lookup. We specified the action on which the lookup should appear and the field that it should have the lookup behavior. And then we specified the lookup page and the fields we want to use as a part of setting the value and displaying the value to the user. So now let's go ahead and upload our business logic file to our sales order management mobile workspace. We'll go to the logic tab for that. Need to make sure we're at the stage where we can select the workspace properties, and then we go to the logic tab. Want to browse for that file. Going to go ahead and select that sales order management JS. Wait till it's uploaded. Going to save our changes. There we go. So we've updated some of the metadata for the mobile workspace. Even the business logic file is considered metadata. So we need to pull to refresh from the landing page here. All right. Now we're going to go ahead and back out. And the reason we come back to the dashboard is because remember we added business logic to the workspace initialization. So we need to make sure that workspace initialization code is fired, and it's only fired when you enter the workspace. So let's go ahead and enter the workspace. There we go. So the business logic has been fired, and we also see our new metadata is visible here. All sites, all products, all warehouses are now visible. Now we should be able to hop into our action, and we should be able to add a line to a sales order. There we go. There we go. We do see the list of item numbers there. That's great. Our list of sites are there as well. And our workspace's lookup is working the way we expect. That's great. But there's one more thing here I want to change, and it's that I don't want my item numbers to start at 1 here, right? Let's say that I only want items that are starting with 1,000 or starting with 1, right? So there's a way to design this, and it's really good to do this in the sales order scenario because not all items are eligible. There's a complex query that determines which items are selectable, but I want to provide you an example for how you can modify the filter on a lookup page to change the values that are visible there. So the way we'll do that is by editing our all products page. We're going to redesign this guy. We're going to use the same fields, but we're going to change the way we design it to make sure there's a permanent filter applied every time this page is opened inside of the mobile app. So the way we do that is first by opening all product and product masters. We have to make sure we open that top level form. All right, and since we've previously designed this action on this form, the select field is going to be enabled only after we open this form. So the form is open. I haven't taken any actions on it. I go ahead and click select fields. Yes, I want to erase what I have and start over. So here is how I apply that permanent filter to make sure that my item numbers start from wherever I decide to have them start from. I go ahead and open the filter pane. And in this case, let's say I want to add a filter such that all of my product numbers, where are my product numbers here? There we go. I want them to begin with 1. Go ahead and click apply. That's going to put my Surface Pro at the very top. And now I can proceed with the rest of the page design process. I can go ahead and select the product number and the product name. And then I click done. So because I applied the filter while I was selecting fields, while I was in the page design experience and we have that orange border, the process of applying this filter is now embedded into this page design. And this filter will be applied whenever data is being loaded for this particular page. Let's go ahead and save these changes and see how it works inside of the mobile app. All right, so I've updated my metadata. I'm going to go back to my landing page, pull to refresh here. Now let's go ahead and hop right into our all products page from the root level. Let's see what it looks like. So I'm probably going to have some cache data here, and that cache data has now been replaced with the data that respects my filter where the product number must begin with 1. And now if I hop back into my add line action on my sales order, I'll also see when I open that lookup, I get the Surface Pro at the top, which is exactly what I want. So now I can select the Surface Pro, can set a quantity here, I can select a site, a warehouse, and I can set a unit price. There we go. Go ahead and click done. This is going to process my action. There we go. So I get the temporary data first. That temporary data is visible, and then I get the data from the server. So we see two items here because I created a line as a part of designing that action, and then we see the line that I created just now from within the mobile app. So you saw that that temporary data was available first time right after I submitted the action. We saw that Surface Pro with a quantity of 6 and an amount of 800. That was in the temporary data and appearing here because the mobile app understands the data schema and because I correctly designed that action. All right. So we're almost done here. There's one last thing I want to do, and it's I don't want for all of my lookup pages to appear here on the landing page. There's no need for the lookup pages to be visible here. I only want sales orders to be visible, and I only want customers, products, site, and warehouses to be visible when you're actually using a lookup, right? So we can design that in Business Logic as well. So let's hop into our Business Logic file. This is a one-time configuration we're doing. We want these pages to be hidden all the time from the landing page. So we'll use the metadata service and use the hide navigation function. And we'll simply pass in here a list of our pages. So what is the first one we have? All customers. Make sure we grab the correct page name there. And they all follow the same syntax. So I'll go ahead and type in the rest. All right. Make sure I haven't made any spelling errors. There we go, and those are the name of my pages. I'll go ahead and save this file. Then go back to the workspace and upload the updated version of my Business Logic file. So I click done, I click save. All right, and now I need to pull to refresh to get that new Business Logic file. And you see my pages are still visible here, and that's because my workspace initialization code hasn't been executed again. I need to leave the workspace and re-enter it. That code is executed, and I see those pages are now hidden, but they're still available inside the lookups where they should be. So I can still select my customer accounts from here, and I can still use all the lookups when I'm adding a line for my item number, my sites, and my warehouses. All right, so that's a bit more involved of a tutorial video, but we showed you some very interesting concepts here. Let's rehash. We showed how to create an action that uses multiple lookups. We showed how you can design a lookup where behind the scenes your form entities don't map up and the designer doesn't allow you to select a lookup because those form entities, those backing tables aren't aligning, but how you can still manually configure that lookup experience in Business Logic. We also showed how you can hide those pages, those lookup pages in Business Logic so that they don't appear on the landing page for your mobile workspace. And we also showed you how you can apply a permanent filter to any particular page, not just a lookup page, by making sure that you use the filter pane and apply that filter as a part of designing your page.